All right, think about your day for a second. You drive to work, that package showing up on your doorstep, pretty much everything runs on GPS, right? It's this system we just trust. It's always there, working in the background. But what if it wasn't? What if this whole global system that our modern world is built on is actually super fragile? Well, we're about to dig into a government investigation that shows just how close we might be to finding out.
I mean, this sounds like something straight out of an action movie, right? Back in 2016, a private jet's just cruising along and then, bam, its GPS signal vanishes. But it wasn't just the map on the screen that went blank. As this FAA safety message points out, there was this hidden dependency, and the plane's stabilization system failed. The aircraft went into what's called a Dutch roll, this really dangerous side-to-side fishtailing motion. The crew had to make an emergency descent, fast. And get this, it wasn't some random glitch. It was GPS interference. It's a pretty terrifying reminder that when GPS goes down, it can drag other absolutely critical systems down with it. So you're probably wondering, how can this even happen? Well, here's the thing. That GPS signal coming all the way from satellites thousands of miles up in space is incredibly weak by the time it gets down to us. It's basically a whisper. And as this graphic from the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, shows, it's actually pretty easy for a much stronger radio signal from the ground to just shout over it. That can either block the signal completely, which means a plane has no idea where it is, or even worse, it can manipulate it and feed the plane a false location. And in aviation, where just a few feet can be the difference between a safe landing and a disaster, yeah, both of those are really bad scenarios. All right, so let's get into what we're up against here, our fragile GPS signal, the invisible threats to a system we trust every single day. To really get a handle on the risk, we first have to understand the threat. And when we're talking about someone intentionally messing with GPS, it really boils down to two main types.
Okay, so on one side, you have jamming. The easiest way to think about this is just loud, disruptive noise. A jammer basically blasts out so much radio interference that it completely drowns out that weak little GPS signal. Your phone or your plane's navigation just throws its hands up and says, "Sorry, I can't get a signal. You know you're lost." But then there's spoofing, and this one is way sneakier. Instead of just blocking the signal, a spoofer hijacks it. It sends out a fake, manipulated signal that your receiver is tricked into thinking is the real deal. So your device doesn't say the signal is lost, it just confidently tells you you're somewhere you're not.
And this graphic really just nails the difference. With normal GPS, everything's great. Your receiver knows exactly where it is. If you're hit with a jamming attack, the signal gets scrambled, and you're left with an unknown position. You are, quite literally, flying blind. But with spoofing, oh, that's different. Your receiver gets these deceptive signals and calculates a false position. You think you know exactly where you are, but you're wrong. And you can see how in so many ways, that's a much more dangerous situation to be in. And look, this isn't just some theoretical what-if scenario. The GAO report is filled with some pretty chilling real-world examples. In 2017, there was this massive spoofing event in the Black Sea where dozens of ships suddenly thought they were miles inland, on the ground, nearly causing some catastrophic collisions. The DOT's gotten reports of drivers whose GPS systems were apparently manipulated to steer them right into oncoming traffic. And then there's this story. While it's not confirmed as deliberate interference, it shows our blind trust. A driver in Mississippi almost drowned because they just followed their GPS directions straight into a river.
So, with all this happening, you would think, you would hope, the government has a really solid system for tracking these things, right? Well, that's where we get to the real heart of the GAO's investigation. A system flying blind. The government struggled to track the problem.
So the agency in charge of this, the one responsible for spotting these threats, is the Department of Transportation, or DOT. The big question the GAO wanted to answer was, how well are they actually doing? Is their process for tracking GPS interference any good? Are they really seeing the whole picture?
Okay, so on the surface, the number they came up with seems kind of manageable. The DOT's official process flagged 196 potential interference incidents between January 2020 and May 2022. But, and this is a huge but, the really interesting part is what that number isn't telling us.
Yeah, because when the GAO started digging into the actual data, the whole thing just kind of fell apart. First off, they found out the DOT isn't even looking at all the reports out there. They completely ignore a separate reporting system run by NASA, which, by the way, had 72 relevant incidents in that same time frame. Poof, missed. Second, the data they do have is a mess. It's so full of duplicates that they had to throw out over half of the entries. And third, and this is a wild one, about 35% of the reports had the wrong location data.
Why? Because staff were just putting in the location of their own office instead of where the incident actually happened. Just wow. So you have to be asking, why is this process so completely broken? Well, this quote from the GAO report is, honestly, it's staggering. The entire system for identifying and analyzing GPS interference for the entire country isn't written down anywhere. It was all developed by a single part-time staff member and, quote, one individual knows how it works and no other staff review or verify the results. I mean, let that sink in. The entire national system rests on one person's shoulders with zero oversight. It's unbelievable.
Okay, so the system is vulnerable, and our method for tracking threats is, well, it's a mess. That's not exactly reassuring. But surely there's a backup plan, right? There has to be. And, well, there is. But it's probably not what you're thinking. Let's talk about the analog backup plan, looking to the past to secure the future.
This is just a perfect visual. On the left, you've got this incredible high-tech constellation of satellites that make up our GPS system. And on the right, that's a VOR station. It's a ground-based radio navigation tower. And believe it or not, that is the heart of our backup plan for aviation. We're using a mid-20th century old-school analog technology to save our 21st century digital system.
This backup system has a name. It's called the VOR Minimum Operational Network, or MON for short. It's basically a skeleton crew of these old VOR towers that pilots used to navigate with all the time before GPS became the king. The FAA is very intentionally keeping a bunch of these online for one specific reason: to act as a fallback in case GPS ever goes dark.
So here's what that means in practice. The MON is designed to be a nationwide safety net. It's a guarantee that if there's a huge GPS outage, any plane flying over the continental US will never be more than 100 nautical miles away from an airport that it can navigate to using only these old-school radio signals. It's not about being efficient or precise like GPS. It's about one thing and one thing only: getting you on the ground safely. Okay, so having a backup is good. That's one piece of the puzzle. But what about the bigger picture? The GAO also took a hard look at the DOT's overall strategy for making our entire transportation system resilient to GPS failures. Let's just say the report card wasn't great. DOT's strategy adrift, the Government Accountability Office's final verdict. This slide really just lays it all out in black and white. It's pretty damning. The GAO measured what the DOT was doing against key standards for how you should manage a big, important program. For things like defining their goals and planning what to do, they only partially met the standard. And for planning how to deal with challenges, they did not align with any elements of the standard. I mean, that's basically a failing grade. And this really gets to the core of the whole problem. It's not that the DOT isn't doing anything. They're funding some research, they're running tests, they're talking to people, but it's all just a bunch of scattered activities. The GAO concluded that there is no single, coherent, overarching strategy that ties it all together. There's no master plan. And without a strategy, you can't define what success looks like, you can't prioritize what's most important, and you have no way of knowing if any of this is actually making us any safer. So, the GAO's recommendations were, thankfully, very direct and very clear. Step 1, fix the data mess. Actually write down the process for tracking interference so it's not just stuck in one person's head. And for goodness sake, put some checks in place to make sure the data is accurate. And step 2, develop a real strategy. Figure out what you're trying to achieve, prioritize the steps to get there, and make a plan for the challenges you're bound to face. The good news is, the DOT has agreed to both of these. And that brings us right back to where we started. We've built our entire modern world on a whisper-thin, incredibly vulnerable signal from space. This investigation shows that our systems for watching for threats and for building up our defenses are deeply, deeply flawed. We have a backup plan, sure, but it's a technology from a totally different era. So the question we're all left with is, as the threats get more and more modern, is our analog safety net really strong enough to catch us?